In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the building tricks I used in my castle MOC. If you haven't already watched the video series where I built this MOC, be sure to go to the playlist here to watch the full series. I'm going to be honest, the real reason I'm making this video right now is because we recently moved. When you move, LEGO things break. Something is going to break. So this is the current state of my castle. And honestly, I was probably going to be taking this apart anyway, so if anything, this just saved me from some decision fatigue, deciding whether or not I should actually take it apart. Now I don't have to do that, the decision has already been made for me. So today, before I take this officially fully apart, I thought I'd just go ahead and talk through some of the more notable building techniques that I've used in this MOC. Starting with the water. Now, I know this is probably not the most interesting of techniques, but I just wanted to play with how I could make the water look a little bit more interesting, and so what I decided to do is actually a 3-layer approach. So the first layer being the gradient. So doing something with a gradient similar to something like this, where we have normal blue and then just fade to some lighter blues there. And then on top of that, we're just using a bunch of these just clear 1x2 plates and fully covering the top of them with these. And then on top of all of that, just plating it off with all of these transparent light blue tiles. So because we have these plates underneath, it just makes it look a lot more watery, I guess, instead of just like plates on tiles, which just doesn't look quite as good in my opinion. This just has a much better, more watery look than this does in my opinion. This is just a little flat, and then you can really see all the studs underneath, where with this it just looks a little bit more watery and transparent and foamy, which I just like the look of. I will say, however, if you decide to go this route, it is a lot more parts intensive, so just be aware that you're going to be using double the amount of pieces if you decide to use the plates underneath as opposed to just tiling it off on top. But as you can see, the gradient where it starts back here and a little bit lighter and then just gets darker as we go a little bit deeper, it looks a lot smoother and a lot cleaner with that extra plate underneath. Next, let's talk about a fun way to use minifigure legs. I found that using them for windows actually creates this nice cross effect if we use some upside down and some right side up. So the way I've done that is with these just lightsaber pieces upside down, and you can see I've just stuck them into the holes on these 1x2 rounded plates, and then that just allowed me to invert them so I can have them upside down, and when it's dark behind, it really creates this nice cross effect that would be really hard to create otherwise. So that was just a fun thing that a lot of people commented on when they saw this build. So I definitely wanted to make sure to just mention that here. Now let's talk about those hexagonal walls. Those were quite difficult to figure out how I was going to do, especially since I wanted to add all of this different detailing and coloring all through that. That really made it a lot more tricky, but I found that these cheese slope pieces are, I believe, 31 degrees, a 31 degree angle. And then these like skeleton arm pieces also match that same angle. And so if we use them together for these connecting the two panels and using these on the sides, then that actually created a perfectly seamless connection there. So if we just used that technique and ran with it, then that is how I was able to get the hexagonal towers. Now, it is kind of fragile, so I had to have multiple of these connection points as I was going up the tower, which actually, I think I can show you right here. As you can see, there is multiple connection points right there, but it was really difficult trying to make it look good while using this technique, just because I was trying to add so much detailing in there, but the end result, I think, did end up looking pretty good. The tricky part was attaching it to the rest of the build, and so I had to create this smooth surface here because these are a little bit offset, so it's not easy to just like stick it on studs. So that just made it really difficult, but I found that just having a smooth surface here and then having it connected on one side worked well enough for me. So this would just sit there, which is probably not gonna go back there because who knows what all got broken when it broke. And then all of these arms would just clip on to these pieces there. I also had this little slanted pillar portion of the tower over here in the water, almost like a support, just supporting the wall but I had it at an angle to make it look a little bit more interesting. And that was just done using, as you can kind of see, this hinge piece right there. So it is all just on a hinge, and then I literally just lined it up until I was able to put some plates over top of it without interfering with this section right here. So it's actually simpler than it looks, but then I just had to kind of hide the whole side of it and then cover it up with some rocks on the sides here, so it looks like it's just going nicely into the ground. After getting the towers, the hardest part was actually probably figuring out how I was going to cap this thing off. And so what I came up with is kind of a messy solution, but it worked out well enough. I'm using brackets and a plate or a tile over here, and brackets and a tile over here, and then some bricks, snot brick on this side and this side. And then that allowed me, with this shape, to slot this in right there. And so now we have this almost flush connection all the way around, and it fit in pretty nicely, a lot better than I could have hoped for. And this connection here, or this little subsection, was actually a little bit more complicated than it looks, simply because these are, I believe, 3.5 plates or studs long, and so I had to actually offset these. You can see how these studs are offset, where this stud is in the middle of these two. So this is all offset, and I had to do that just to get these to be the correct length of this panel, where this is 7 studs long, and then I only have 2 of these plates. I had to build this subsection with all of these jumpers just so that I could have the perfect size of a platform to go into the top right there. Now this one may be a little obvious, but I had never seen anyone use these mushroom hat pieces as mushrooms themselves. So this is just from the CMF mushroom minifigure, and I just took them and used them in a little mushroom patch back here. Maybe a little self-explanatory, straightforward, kind of simple, but it just worked really nicely to have a nice little patch of red mushrooms here up in the forest. And then another kind of bonus one, before I get to my favorite thing, I tried using a bunch of these pre-molded, larger kind of rock pieces in odd shapes and ways. So this one was just used with another one of these hinge pieces, and then you can see I have just kind of made a place for it with the snot pieces right in the back there, and it really quite nicely just fits in perfectly and is perfectly flush up here with these cheese slopes. Now those cheese slopes are actually also at different heights, or I don't know the best way to say that, but this one is using a bracket and this one in the back is just on a snot brick. So because of that, we get the angle of them both perfectly flush here at the front. All right, I think this will be a little easier just taking this off so I can show it better. But you can see this is a bracket, this light gray bracket right next to this white snot brick. And you can see I have brackets going all sorts of different angles here. And then right there is where this little hinge piece connects. And then here at the top, that makes it perfectly flush with these cheese slopes. And then with this kind of cheese slope back here. And it just all fits in so nicely. The only odd gap I'd say is this area, but it was small enough that I was not really concerned about it. And then at the top, I just kind of covered it off and blended it into the rest of the rock work with this piece. And then for this rock piece, it is actually just attached in there by a mixel joint with a little bar, and that would just stick into that little spot right there. Now we're going to look at my probably favorite technique that I used on this build, and that is this curved wall here, this curved stone wall along the water. So you can probably guess, but I used a bunch of flex tubes for this, and then all of these little stones is just attached with a clip. So I have all sorts of different clips and shapes and sizes of these stones. So the idea is that like each of these sections is a stone brick that was just set there on top of one another. And you can see I've used all sorts of different like cheese slopes, tiles, plates to get quite a variety. of looks there. There's even a lightsaber piece where it's a little bit more straight. But then for this curved one, this is just one big flex tube that is going all along there, and there's 2 layers of them. This bottom level is on one flex tube, this level is on one flex tube, and then the top actually attached to this flex tube there. So I could have 3 layers of stones with only 2 flex tubes. And here along the side, it's probably a little easier to see what I'm talking about. I'm just using a couple of these headlight bricks with these modified plates with clips, and then that's what I'm attaching the flex tubes and just these rod pieces onto. This is what the inside of it looks like, and underneath there you can see how I was able to kind of get this curve, and it just clearly bends right along there. And then here's all the clips that I am attaching these to, and even these what are they called, headlight bricks. I keep forgetting the name. Those are even on angles as well sometimes. And then to get this nice curve at the top, it's just a combination of varying wedge plates and tiles, and even some odd ways to fill in some of the smaller gaps, like this clip with this little shrub piece. The hardest part was definitely when it had to blend into the actual natural terrain, but with some just trial and error experimentation, I was able to just come up with something that kind of closed the gap there where it connected. It's kind of hard to tell now that I've just completely ripped it off, but yeah, I had to be a little creative, and I can probably show it a little bit easier on the other section. Over here in this section, you can kind of see how I just blended it into the terrain. Well, not really blended, it's just kind of attached right up next to it. So this is just using one of these kind of grill slopes here, and that is almost flush there with the rock work. So you kind of have to be a little creative. You can see on the bottom I'm just using a cheese slope to go towards this normal, like, upward slope right there on the rocks. And yeah, just being creative really kind of allowed for me to get some nice connection there where it kind of seamlessly goes into the rock work. And you can see just all the different ways I've used bricks, like the cheese slopes going together, one up and one down, and then just the different colors for moss and different colored stones, and I think that looked pretty nice. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope there was some helpful tips in there and things that you can use in some of your own MOCs. I'm really curious to see what some of you do with some of these interesting techniques and just different ways of using, like the minifigure legs and the flex tubes and all sorts of different stuff. So if you got some value out of this video, go ahead and like this video just so I can see what you guys appreciate. And it really does help the algorithm and help my channel grow. So if you aren't subscribed already, go ahead and do that too. I really appreciate it. And I'm really thankful for everyone who has already followed along. It's just been great to see. So subscribe, stick around for future videos like this. Let me know in the comments what you think and if you're gonna use any of these. Here's some more videos that YouTube thinks you might also appreciate, but that's gonna do it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.